Welcome to the reading of the Sabbath School lesson for the second quarter of 2022. Welcome to lesson number 6 in the series on Genesis. It's titled The Roots of Abraham. It's ready for teaching on May 7, and I'm Percy Harrold. Thursday, May 5, the Tithe of Melchizedek. Read Genesis chapter 14, verses 18 to 24, and Hebrews 7, 1 to 10. Who was Melchizedek? Why did Abraham give his tithe to this priest who seems to appear out of nowhere? Genesis 14, beginning at verse 18. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High, and he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tithe of all. Now the king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the persons, and take the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to the Lord, God Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take nothing from a thread to a sandal strap, and that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abram rich, except only when the young men have eaten, and the portion of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. And Hebrews 7, 1 to 10, For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham, returning from the slaughter of the kings, and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a 10th part of all, first being translated King of Righteousness, and then also King of Salem, meaning King of Peace, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginnings of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually. Now consider how great this man was, to whom even the patriarch Abraham gave a 10th of the spoils. And indeed, those who are of the sons of Levi who receive the priesthood have a commandment to receive tithes from the people according to the law, that is, from their brethren, though they have come from the loins of Abraham. But he whose genealogy is not derived from them received tithes from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. Now, beyond all contradiction, the lesser is blessed by the better. Here mortal men receive tithes, but there he receives them of whom it is witnessed that he lives. Even Levi, who receives tithes, paid tithes through Abraham, so to speak, for he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. The sudden appearance of the mysterious Melchizedek is not out of place. After Abram had been thanked by the Canaanite kings, he now thanks this priest, a thankfulness revealed by his paying his tithe to him. Melchizedek comes from the city of Salem, which means peace, an appropriate message after the turmoil of war. The component Tzedek, T-S-E-D-E-K, or justice, in the name of Melchizedek, appears in contrast to the name of the king of Sodom, Bera, in evil, and Gomorrah, Bersha, in wickedness, probably surnames for what they represent, as we read in Genesis 14, verse 2, that they made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemabah, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is, Zoar. Melchizedek appears after the reversal of the violence and evil represented by the other Canaanite kings. This passage also contains the first biblical reference to the word priest, as we read in Genesis chapter 14 and verse 18. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High. The association of Melchizedek with God Most High in Genesis 14:18, whom Abram calls his own God in Genesis 14:22, clearly indicates that Abram saw him as priest of the God Abram served. Melchizedek is, however, not to be identified with Christ. He was God's representative among the people of that time. And there's extensive quotes from Ellen White in the Seventh-day Adventist Bible Commentary, Volume 1, pages 1092 and 1093, if you have a copy of that. Melchizedek officiates indeed as a priest. He serves bread and wine, an association that often implies the use of fresh-pressed grape juice, as we read in Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 13. And he will love you and bless you and multiply you. He will also bless the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your land, your grain and your new wine and your oil, the increase of your cattle and the offspring of your flock in the land which he swore to your fathers to give you. And 2 Chronicles chapter 31 and verse 5. As soon as the commandment was circulated, the children of Israel brought in abundance the first fruits of grain and wine, oil and honey, and of all the produce of the field, and they brought in abundantly the tithe of everything. This reappears in the context of the giving of the tithes in Deuteronomy 14, verse 23, "And you shall eat before the Lord your God, in the place where he chooses to make his name abide, the tithe of your grain and your new wine and your oil, of the firstborn of your herds and your flocks, that you may learn to fear the Lord your God always." In addition, he extends blessing to Abram in Genesis 14 and verse 19, "And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth." Abram, meanwhile, gave him a tithe of all, as we read in verse 20 of chapter 14. "And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand," and he gave him a tithe of all. This was as a response to God the Creator, the possessor of heaven and earth, as we've just read in verse 19. This title alludes to the introduction of the creation story in Genesis 1 and verse 1. "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," where the phrase heavens and earth means totality or all. As such, the tithe is understood as an expression of gratitude to the Creator who owns everything, as we read in Hebrews 7, verses 2 to 6, "To whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being translated King of Righteousness, and then also King of Salem, meaning King of Peace, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest continually. Now consider how great this man was, to whom even the patriarch Abraham gave a tenth of the spoils. And indeed, those who are of the sons of Levi, who receive the priesthood, have a commandment to receive tithes from the people according to the law, that is, from their brethren, though they have come from the loins of Abraham. But he whose genealogy is not derived from them receives tithes from Abraham, and blessed him who had the promises." And we'll compare this with Genesis chapter 28 and verse 22. "And this stone which I have set as a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that you give me I will surely give a tenth to you." Paradoxically, the tithe is understood by the worshipper not as a gift to God, but as a gift from God, because God gives us everything to begin with. And so to finish today, why is the act of returning tithe a powerful indicator of faith, as well as a great faith-building act? This lesson was read by Dr. Percy Harrold for Christian Services for the Blind. Sponsored by the Sabbath School Department and distributed through Hope Channel Australia, this podcast is also redistributed by Hope Channel Germany, Christian Record Services for the Blind, and It Is Written. It is also available on SoundCloud and through multiple podcast distributors, including Apple iTunes. Remember, God is always faithful.